Neil Strauss, what's up, dude? Welcome back to the show.
Oh, man, it's good to have you here.
This is
good to have me here.
Yeah, this is.
You.
It's good to have both of us here.
Yes.
This is really fun because those of you listening, I'm sure
I guess you are here. You're here at my thing, and I'm here at your thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we're here at Neil Strauss's Intensive, and this is a very meaningful event for me to participate in for a number of reasons. Because there's so many guys here that I know and respect, and the speakers, and it's always fun to see you and catch up. But my public speaking career, in terms of health and wellness and spirituality and the things that I'm into, really began, I guess it was about 3 years ago at one of the other intensives. And what had happened is you reached out to me, Neil reached out to me and said, hey, I'm putting together a thing on biohacking. I know you're a big health nut. Who would be some of the great speakers to have? I made a couple recommendations and a couple intros. And then I swear to God, I was like nervous to even do this. And I debated, I don't know. He's going to feel weird because we're kind of friends. I don't want to make it awkward. I said, fuck it. And I said, Neil, if you could squeeze me in to do a talk, I'd really love to, come and just for a few minutes, just share some stuff with the guys. And you answered right back. We're like, cool, we'll put you on right after David Wolf on opening night.
Right.
I was like, dude, not exactly what I had in mind. A little more involvement than I felt that I was ready for. But, that was really the point at which I made a decision to pursue my life's passion, which is helping alleviate suffering for people in the ways that I've suffered and what I've figured out. And, the great response I got from you and Rick Rubin and the other speakers like Jack Cruz and Daniel Vitalis and all the people there. I mean, I got a couple people, including you, that said, dude, why aren't you doing this? This is your calling.
Yeah.
And even despite self-doubt and low self-esteem issues and stuff that said, I can't do it, I'm not good enough, whatever that bullshit was, I couldn't ignore feedback from so many people that I respected. And that was the beginning of my journey. So again, I think I mentioned this when we recorded before, but I don't forget where I came from, and I don't forget the people that helped me along the way.
Yeah, when I get so excited when I see your success, or people coming up to me and mentioning, "Did you hear this on the Luke Story podcast?" Or it's so exciting. I even remember you sending me the thumbnails for the different for the podcast originally, the different thumbnails in which we like the best. But here's what I remember about that talk specifically. So I think maybe you had an hour at the end of the day, but you had prepared so much stuff. And it was so good and such high quality because you have a great combination of being likable, which not everybody in this community is, right? And giving good takeaway content that people can use, suggestions, content very applicable, and not getting too lost in the weeds of the science that everybody can follow along. So whether you're an expert or sort of a beginner, there's enough for both people in there. So you presented so beautifully. And then I remember you're like barely through your presentation. So we said that was Friday night. We said, okay, let's put you on at the end of the day Saturday. So we added a slot for you. You weren't done yet. And I'm like, does anyone hear more of Luke? And everyone's like, hell yeah. So we put you on the end of the day Sunday night. So it became kind of like, because of the quality of what you were offering, it just became like a whole through line of the intensive.
That's so cool, and that was huge for me too.
Because you wanted to be heard, you're worried no one wanted to hear, and everybody wanted to hear you.
Yeah, it was, again, even in the feedback from the guys too, I was like, God, I just can't ignore this. This isn't in my head that people are responding because the feedback was so immediate. I even, at one of those talks, I got a standing ovation.
Yeah.
I was like, what the hell?
Right.
My heroes, the guys that I pay money to go see speak, are speaking, and none of them got one.
Right.
I'm like, okay, this is weird.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the origin story, and here we are full circle, having turned this into a career and doing all kinds of things now, and it feels really good to be back here and to see you and be able to continue to contribute.
And then the message for people listening is, so many people come up when someone comes up and says, I want to do this, here's my marketing and business plan, and here's how I'm branding myself. I always think, oh, you've got that all backward. You start something with just, I really enjoy this, and I'm really curious about it. And your enjoyment and curiosity turns to an obsession. And then your obsession turns into an expertise. And then you just do it versus, oh, that's where I want to be. I'm just going to start doing it. What's my plan? It's just like interest. I guess it's interest to curiosity, to learning, to obsession, to expertise, and that's a natural course of, becoming all the people who most people like and respect. It really wasn't like some marketing branding plan. It looks like that afterward, but most of them just got serious and got lucky and cared enough to really put their whole hearts into it.
Yeah, for sure. And that was, I understood sort of the content marketing strategy.
Right.
And the first thing that you do is just give. And so that's what I really have been doing for the first 2 years out of this 3 years now. I didn't start ever trying to sell anything or have any affiliates or anything for 6 months after my podcast was even out. And then I was like, hey, if you want to donate on Patreon, or had a little PayPal thing. I mean, no one really did it, but then I started to actually get paid a little bit. And I thought, holy shit. Yeah. This is what I do for free anyway.
Right.
You know, come over to your house, go through your cabinets, show you all the aspartame and MSG.
I remember that.
Get rid of that shit. I mean, it's not like, oh, how much money am I going to make? It's like, oh my God, I geeked the fuck out on this stuff. It's just super fun for me to do it, and the other person benefits too. And
it always starts that way, and that's what people don't get, because people try to backward engineer their own success and can't figure it out. But for me, I know when something I'm doing is going to be successful, not because the marketing plan, because when I talk about it, people get excited and want to hear more.
Right.
Like, it's that simple.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's always what I tell people when they come to me and say, hey, your podcast seems to be doing well. I want to have a podcast. What's the strategy? What's the thing? I said, dude, be passionate about what you're putting out and just do it consistency, and don't worry about what you're getting back. That's going to come. Yeah. If you're passionate, people are going to feed off your passion. Like we watched Jack Cruz in here. I mean, whether or not guys in the room agree with him or not, they're all glued to everything he says because he's so goddamn passionate about it.
Yeah, just do shit you enjoy.
Yeah, exactly.
Really, and then there's like the what about money question. Like, I got a feeling, I feel like I can say this. None of you listening to this right now are going to die from lack of money. You're not. Like, I don't think anyone's going to die from. Please let us know if I'm wrong. But like, you're going to. I really feel if you have a slight personality, someone will always let you stay on their couch and eat their food.
Yeah, totally.
You really will. Like,
and people always have dirty windows.
Exactly.
All right. So
okay, let's get forward.
Yeah, let's go ahead and let's jump into it.
You
know, I always like to do a little recap with people that have been on the show before. And for those of you listening, we did a show all about relationship dynamics and stuff before, which was huge for me at the time because I was in a relationship. My partner at the time was with me at your house, and it was interesting because a lot of the things I was asking you about, I don't know if you got that, pertained to the situation I was in. I was kind of hoping she would hear some of it. Maybe it would help us work things out and build something. And, you know, ultimately that relationship dissolved, unfortunately. But it was a great conversation, so I'd encourage people to go back and check that out. But you're a guy who is obviously an author, one of my favorite authors. Even if I didn't know you, I'd say, oh, he's my favorite author. I love his books. Your books make me laugh. I cry. I can't put them down. They're like crack books. You just have a knack for writing. And one of the first books, I think your first one I read was the Marilyn Manson one.
Yeah,
because my girlfriend was on tour with them, and I had to break up with her because I was mortified at what went on their tour.
Right.
But then I read The Game, which was you infiltrating this, subculture of pickup artists. You infiltrated that as you started writing the book, as you do this fully immersive style writing where you don't write about it, you write in it, from it.
Right.
So you went into that. Then you start teaching guys how to meet people and have social skills and pick up women and get a wife or get laid or whatever they're trying to do, in relationship. And use that stuff, went through this whole period of personal growth and evolution, which culminated in a book called The Truth, which is one of my all-time favorite books. And I was, we're similar age, and I kind of went through the same cycles of going out, dating a lot of people, not wanting to commit, trying open relationships, doing all that stuff. That eventually kind of hit a dead end for me. Went through a breakup, was very sad, lost someone I really loved because I was kind of too immature to bring, what was required to sustain that relationship in a fulfilling way for her. And then I read The Truth, and it was like this. I used to sit on my couch, dude, and just cry while I was reading it because it was like, spoiler alert, stop listening now if you don't want to know the end of the book. But at the end, you got your love back that you had lost, and I didn't. And I was just reading that story going, and it identified so many ways in which I was stuck in relationship. And now it's been a few years since you spent a few years writing The Truth. It spanned over quite a long period of time, I think around 5 years.
Yeah.
And now it's been a few years since the book came out. And now that relationship that you managed to save in the book, which was this great hero's journey with a happy ending, now your relationship is changing and ending the romantic part of it. So where are you in your life now in terms of your marriage, separation, the prospect of dating, romance, all of that, having been someone that's gone through quite an arc of a cycle?
Yeah, really, to me, it's kind of the phases of life. And I'm really in like the parenting, being a great dad phase. I really fully believe, like, if you really want to change the world, we're already fucked. Really healthy parenting is the key to world peace. People act out their trauma. People are acting out their trauma hardcore now on each other. and they become perpetrators even because they've been victims in the past. So I really believe like understanding healthy parenting and healthy psychology and how to raise a child, because again, it really is, we're born to be so adaptable, and they'll adapt to whatever that home environment is. So to me, that's the next phase now, is just being a great dad.
Are there any thoughts for books in the work on conscious parenting, on, parenting as a modern integrated person?
There's something I might do, but the main answer is like I don't do a book until I really feel like I 100% have something new to contribute that hasn't been said in that way before. Just because I think just because I did it, it doesn't make it interesting to me. It's only interesting if I'm like, this somehow moves the conversation forward.
Right.
So hopefully I'll get to that place.
Okay, so I'm going to jump back a little bit, because the main purpose of this podcast is actually to talk about
I'm
parenting.
so excited to talk about it and what I'm doing.
But I do want to get a little bit of an update, though, in terms of your relationship, because, I talked to you or Ingrid recently, and someone said, like, oh, I'm moving over there. I was like, I'm moving?
Yeah.
Not we're moving?
Yeah.
And so we haven't really talked
Sure.
about it, but I see you and you're like, oh, yeah, we're separating and divorcing.
Yeah.
That phase has ended. What's that been like?
And you see us together, we have a great relationship.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm like, I want a little bit of a report on that, because I saw her. She seems happy. You seem happy. You seem like two mature people that have figured out, hey, our relationship is going to change and evolve into a different way where we're not together in that capacity. So how has that looked, and how have you managed to not hate each other like many do when they get divorced?
I mean, the main thing is just emotional intelligence and maturity. Like, there's no reason to hate somebody I think, man, I have so much to say. I'm brewing with like 10 ideas at the same time, but I'll make the first point. The first point is most shit is completely made up. Most everything is made up. The idea that a marriage has to last forever or a certain length of time. The idea that first of all, big myth, that if a relationship doesn't last forever, that it's a failure. The only relationship that's a failure is one that lasts longer than it should, when you're no longer happy and miserable in
That's
it.
good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Right? Like, it's just, it's crazy when people say it didn't work out. No. Like, what? Like, it worked out. It probably worked out amazingly for 1, 3, or 5 years. And it really works out if, like, we've had nothing is joyful anymore. And now it's time to, find a way to part in a healthy way. So that's one. Two is,
that's great.
Like, really, like, there's no, and people who stay together for the kids is insane. The kids don't need their parents to stay together. What they need is healthy, loving parents, period, and positive role models. And two bickering, unhappy parents staying together, like, is really role modeling something horrible, or worse. Sometimes there's literally, I know people who are emotionally abusive with each other. You're modeling that for your children. Or you're modeling just a lack of love, a lack of intimacy, a lack of contact. There's a way, contact. So we have these really myths we're stuck to. Another myth is the monogamy, non-monogamy myth. It's a made-up thing. Like, there's no monogamy, it's just a made-up thing, in my opinion, by the way. This is just my opinion. In the sense that, like, and we look at our animals monogamous, or we got to study it. No, it's just like, here's the thing on monogamy and non-monogamy, since is you do what's best for you and your partner or partners, which is, let's say if you're dating someone or married to someone, there's 3 entities. There's you, there's the person you're dating, there's the relationship. So if I feel trapped and I want to sleep with someone else, and it's going to hurt you, but you're going to let me do it because you don't want to lose me, that's unhealthy, right? Healthy is, we're together, we're in love, and you have an abundant surplus of me, I have a surplus of you. And maybe me or you having an experience, a partner together, would then bring more joy and love into our life. So it would help the relationship, it would help you, be positive for you and be positive for me, then let's go experiment. And if one day that changes, we renegotiate. But the idea is, like, it can evolve and change. So being in a relationship and just saying we're monogamous or we're non-monogamous forever, it's like taking a job and saying, I'm just going to, I'm just going to file these papers and take these phone calls for this person.
Cut widgets.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For the rest of my life, which is insane.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, and having experienced some different cycles in life, and weirdly enough, like I said, have corresponded with your writing.
Right.
Where I am in my life now, I'm single. I just took as I told you, 19 months off from dating, sex, any of that. Recently made a decision. I think I'm really ready to start dating. I know exactly what I want, and I know exactly what I have to offer, and I'm more clear about that than I've ever been in my life, having taken a break and really looked inside and done the fucking work.
Right.
And I was the guy that would never be monogamous, always wanted open relationships, tried all these different configurations, and sometimes the partner would agree, sometimes not. If they didn't agree, we broke up. And I was very stuck in this idea that monogamy is something made up to control you and all these weird sort of childish kind of ideas about it, when in fact, as you said, it is a choice that conscious people make at different times in their life or different stages of the relationship. Right. But it's funny now because when I hear you talk about just the concept of, you're with someone and you both love each other so much that you allow the other one to be free and stuff. That sounds so horrendous.
But listen to your word. But listen to your word.
Okay.
But listen to your word. By the way, you must always question the premises of the culture that you're randomly born into. Okay. Meaning we're stuck on these premises that are just false. So, but listen, that they allow you. So your idea is you're turning them into a captor, not a partner. Right. Like if they allow you, there's no allowing. Like they're not allowing. You're free in a relationship to do whatever you want. You just have to live with the consequences. So if you're with somebody and you say, "Hey, I would love to have this experience with this person I met," and they say, "No, I'm not comfortable with that," you can still say, "Well, I'm going to choose to do that," and the consequence is you might not have your relationship. So if it's worth it to you, go do it. Right. You're not allowed to do it. You just don't get to control the other person. What you're perceiving as allowing is actually controlling. I want to do what I want, and I want you to feel good about it, right? No matter what. Right.
Yeah, that's an interesting distinction.
People get so caught. I was just talking to someone today. They turn the biggest thing you can do that will kill a relationship is if you turn your partner into a parrot. And they're like, I just feel trapped. They're not trapping you. Maybe they're not happy if you do that, but you can still go do it. Right? And people feel like they're controlled, they're trapped. Like literally, unless they've got like a lock and key or something, like you really can go do what you want.
Unless they dug like a sub basement and they lock you in there.
Right. It's crazy, but
we truly a captive.
But it's like we get in a relationship and instantly are like, wounded 5-year-old or 13-year-old comes out.
Well, that's, I think many of my experiences have been largely shaped by early childhood enmeshment and those types of things where I did feel trapped or responsible or they're letting me or not letting me. Where I've arrived at now is what seems most appealing and attractive, although I'm not yet in a relationship, is I'm very much attracted to the idea of the sanctity of that relationship and the safety of building true intimacy without any interruptions from outside stuff. Like that's a side I've not really explored.
And do it if it's right for you. But here's my thought. Yeah. Erase monogamy, non-monogamy. It's just about commitment. It's about commitment to that person. So you might have the idea that you want the sanctity and no outside interruptions. But you might fall in love with someone who has some other ideas about what's intimate to them, right? But are you committed to the relationship to figure out what that third entity, what's going to grow that?
Interesting.
Right? Because now it's just what you're saying is just the flip side of the same coin.
Right.
By the way, there's this notary here. I have to notarize something really quickly.
Oh, that's okay.
Hold on. Just FYI, it's not divorce papers.
Neil's taking a break to sign some legal papers.
I'm trying to get a...
this is a first. I love that.
I'm trying to build a pool. I got inspired by the Laird Hamilton workouts to get a pool going.
You're going to build a pool at your place?
Yeah, totally.
Amazing. Tell me when it's done. I'm coming over.
Yeah, totally. We'll get some weights
and
go underwater. Whoops. I'm giving you need my ID, right? Oh, you don't?
I know you.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I need to come over all the time.
Are you putting it out like where your lawn is, behind the house? Or
right,
over where the garden goes down?
It's weird. You can't. Malibu is so strict with buildings. I'm putting it, kind of where we sat into the last podcast in my living room. If you look out that window, it's out that area.
Oh, cool.
It'll be kind of with a little infinity edge there.
Oh, amazing.
Hold 1 second. I'm just signing this.
We'll edit out. We'll edit out the dead air.
You can keep this in. This is very exciting.
Editor, remove the dead air space here, please.
This is kind of what you do when you're busy. Is you definitely some things sometimes overlap.
I would feel so important if someone was coming with an official legal binder.
Yeah.
Sorry, I need your signature. We need it by 3.
Okay.
And then if you could sign right here.
Thank you. Do you give consent to give your voice to this podcast recording? Thank you for coming over.
And let's thank our special guest.
Exactly. And did I sign that right just there? Okay. Cool. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, City of Malibu. Right there? Cool. All right. It's a new experience for everyone, right? Okay, cool. And I'll give you this. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Luke's listeners.
Okay. So that's funny. I think we might just leave that part in.
We should. It's funny.
Because now I want to ask you about
They
the
can
pool.
just hit the 30-second skip button like they do in all their commercials anyway.
Exactly. You bastards. Don't skip my commercials. But when the Malibu Fires just happened.
Oh, man.
Yeah, well, what I thought of, because I saw you tweet or Instagram or
Right.
something like, I'm 99.9% sure my house is on because
Right.
a bunch of shit on Point Doom burned and you were out of the country. And I was like, oh, of course. Oh, my God. But what I first remembered was, I think it was in your book Emergency, you talked about this foam or some shit you can spray on your house if a fire's coming and your house won't burn down.
Yes.
And I was like, how ironic that the guy I learned how to not let your house burn down
Yeah.
from, that you keep the shit in your garage in case there's a fire, it's out of the country.
Yeah.
And he's the one with the burned down house.
Yeah.
And then you come back and your house is standing and everyone else's house is burned down.
Right.
What is that stuff you
It's
can
called
spray on?
thermogel. THERMO-gel.
Okay.
And yeah, you spray it on your house, and I mean, I think you'll probably also want some shutters so the embers don't come in if there's a broken window.
Okay.
You spray it in your house, and the fire skips right over it. Supposedly, what it also does, the downside, just to be like, everything has its downside. Just like with food, nothing's 100% healthy.
Right.
So the downside of this is it does peel off some of the paint in your house. You get your house like power cleaned, maybe repainted afterward. But again, that's a small price compared to like rebuilding your entire
Right.
house for 3 years of stress and torture.
Right.
And if your insurance doesn't cover it all and everything else.
Yeah. Well,
But that's it. But it was funny to be away, and I'm totally prepared,
Yeah.
but I'm like thousands of miles away, but it's all right there to save the house.
That's
but
crazy.
the main thing that I learned from the fires that we were talking the other day, I was saying that I learned all the lessons of losing all my stuff without losing it, having to lose it. And the real lesson was like, most of this stuff is just like stuff. I realized how much stuff I missed, and it was very little. Like you could put it in one plastic, not plastic, of course we hate plastic, in one recyclable tub.
Right.
And all the stuff I've been dragging around, so precious about, so little of it matters. But what does matter is like the relationships. You know what I mean? To me, a worse disaster in Malibu, around in that area, was the shooting in Thousand Oaks. I think there might have been 3 deaths with the fires in Malibu, but it's like burn everything as long as the people you love survive.
Yeah.
And the people, even the people you don't love, they should survive.
Yeah,
like
for
the
sure.
relationships that really made me want to just less stuff, more relationships.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to close the loop on the relationships thing.
Yeah.
So you and your lovely now ex-wife Ingrid
Right.
have decided to separate, and you guys seem happy and like you're getting along. Aside, you mentioned emotional intelligence.
Right.
So what are your plans? Like how do the mechanics of that look?
Yeah. And first of all,
And still co-parenting.
Yeah.
And, obviously
Yeah.
saying, hey, we're breaking up, but we still have 10, your amazing, beautiful, smart little boy that, is, of course, both of your priority.
right. And nothing's permanent. It's all just right for right now. Like if we feel later this is the 100% best relationship, we can be back in it if we both feel that way. If one of us feels that way, too bad, right? But like nothing. It's just all made up shit. Just because you divorce, you can't get back together later. But it's about doing what's right for your own kind of joy and happiness. So the main thing, like I'll say is, I think the short version is just the relationship got to a point where it just wasn't, it was bringing down instead of lifting for both of us. And having tried everything, this was the last thing left to, I guess, try.
Yeah.
But the main point I'll make is, well, it's one thing separating or divorcing when it's just the two of you. It's another when there's a child or children in the mix. And I'd always felt this way. I'm the child of 2 parents who really didn't get along. I asked my mom one day what she wanted for her 50th anniversary, and she was like, "You can shoot your father for me."
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so they were miserably together, and even as a child, I would wish they would have affairs or just do something so they could be happy. So that's kind of the context where I was the child of parents that didn't divorce, and that was traumatic to see 2 people unhappy stuck together.
Yeah.
So the thing about, again, we have all these false ideas that divorce is bad for children, and the idea is, and again, it's different he's 3.5, and in my head I thought, if divorce feels like you're losing something, it feels bad. If it feels like you're gaining something that feels good. And so 10's my son's name, and he has a friend, and his friend just got a new house. And I took him over, and they played, and they were excited about his friend's new house. So I was like, do you want a new house? He's like, yeah. We're like, okay, let's get you a new house. And Ingrid and I both have cars, so it's mom's car and dad's car. He's like, mama's car, Dada's car. I'm like, let's do mama's house, Dada's house. And so for him, he was so excited when he went to Ingrid's house, which is not that far away. He got out, and I filmed it. He like screamed with excitement. He was so excited about the new house. He was happy about the new house. He was talking about it with his friends. And because because Ingrid and I still get along, sometimes I might be there. And so there should be no interruption of service. Right?
Right.
He gets a continuity of service.
Of love service.
Of love service. And that service is the love of your mother and your father. And I will, and also like just fucking like I hear so many people, like it just breaks my heart. They're I work with obviously mostly men who have and deal with their trauma and their childhood issues. And so many kids were like messengers for their parents, or their parents would try to put them on their side or my side. Like, it's insane to be so immature that you being right about your partner being a bad person is more important than your child being like happy and healthy and not fucked up. It is the height of emotional immaturity. And in this culture, where right now we're really kind of looking at the culture and what are the messages this sends to people, fucking nobody is talking in a way, let's say in a mainstream media way where we're aware of it, about the role that parenting plays in that. It's all about what are the advertisements saying, what are the TV saying, it starts with your parenting. And later, when you're watching the media messages at 12 or 13 or 20 or 30 or 40, most of that shit's whatever you are is already cemented in.
Yeah.
Or not cemented, it's cement strong, but let's just say glue it in. You can still
You've got
pull
a
the glue apart.
foundation
Yeah.
fundamentally in
Yeah.
your character.
Yeah.
I would agree. Yeah, I often marvel at the lack of responsibility that many people have in terms of why kids go astray and do crazy shit, get into drugs, commit murders, do all the things that they do. It always is the responsibility is deflected out into the environment, right, and into society and the different.
I always had this half-joking idea that if you arrested the parents for the crime a child did, it would change. And here's the
amazing
thing: and the person who is, say, the black sheep of the family or the scapegoat of the family, it's usually an unhealthy response to a dysfunctional system. Right?
Yeah.
And it kills me. It kills me, man. I watch so much bad parenting happen, even as adults, and people, they'll take on these beliefs. Some will say, well, I was a bad kid. I'm like, how are you a bad kid? It's like, I was just always out of control, running around the house, screaming. I'm like, no, you were a kid. Your parent couldn't handle you, so they called it bad to control it. You were a normal kid. You weren't a bad kid, but you've been growing up 30 years actually believing the story, just like we're talking about being hypnotized by the culture, being hypnotized by your parental story.
I was going to ask you about that. It's a good. It comes a little later in the sequence.
Yeah. Go ahead and walk by. Some people want to walk by. Yeah.
It comes a little later in the sequence of my questions, but one of the things I'm curious about is, especially with a boy, I think, being a former boy, is how do you discipline, your son 10, or what's a healthy way to discipline a boy without, emasculating them or stifling their wildness and their inherent need to run around and shoot guns and break stuff and throw rocks and do stuff that little boys do. I feel like when I was a kid, when I was out of the house, I went wild and caught snakes and did all that stuff. When I visited my dad, we shot guns and fished and did boy stuff, just natural. If you go back in time and look at a hunter-gatherer boy, I did some of that. But because my mom was, maybe because she was a female or had different ideas, some of that behavior, like owning big knives and things like that, out of her care for me, was not allowed. And, I think a lot of parents, especially, as I said, with boys, kind of stifle what makes them grow up and have a sense of autonomy and knowing who they are and being well-rounded and healthy. So when a kid gets out of line, what's the I guess what I'm looking for is like, where do you draw the line and your perspective in terms of like how wild you allow your kid to get,
right? And
what do you do when they cross the line and get too wild without shaming them?
Right. Yeah. I mean, just a couple things. And again, in the premise, it doesn't matter what the gender of the child is.
Okay.
Right. It doesn't matter what they're playing with. Right. Like literally.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Point.
Like I always, even separate from what the culture's saying, I've just always felt this way. It's like whatever. It's like when 10 sees Ingrid putting on makeup, he loved, like, was into makeup. And we're like, cool, we got a little toy makeup set to play with. And then when he saw someone cleaning the house, like, then he wants cleaning stuff and he get him fun clean, whatever. Like, I just support whatever he's into, period. Right?
Got it. Okay.
Like, so I support whatever he's into. And then as far as the line goes, like, it's funny, I never think of discipline. I know there's an old school, like, you got to discipline, whatever. I just think of, like, teaching. Right? I'm never disciplining. I'm just kind of teaching.
Cool.
So, but let's go back. Let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
And again, I can talk. My son is not a teenager; he's 3.5, but I want to talk a little bit about teenage too. But let's just start chronologically. So let's start with before you're born. And again, there's a lot of health stuff, but we're going to talk about the psychological stuff. And one of the core wounds that people have is being unwanted as a child. Right? So many people, whether they're forever, it ranges from dad found out mom was pregnant and left her. Right? Or it ranges from just like you were an accident. It ranges from, we don't know how to handle you. This core feeling of being unwanted creates a great big shame wound that people carry throughout their life. You're nodding because it sounds familiar.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And mine was just made up.
Right.
Yeah. I never actually got those messages from my parents, but I made them up.
And you can make them up. So this is what I did. So before he was born, like I wrote him a letter. And I said, dear 10, I want to tell you that, on this one day, like I'm so excited to have a child. Ingrid and I wanted to have you so much, and we made this decision to have you, and we're so excited for you to come in the world. And let him know, like, what our mind state was at his conception, and as we excitedly wait for him to come into the world. Then I folded it up, put it in an envelope, stamped it, mailed it to him at our address, and now it's in a safe deposit box for him, because later, when you grow up, he might feel, like he said, he might make up that feeling that he was unwanted later. And here, no matter what happens, he has a solid foundation of love to stand on in the world. You know what I mean? And a parent can say, no, I always loved you and you're wanted. But in your core, you don't believe that. Here's like that beautiful proof.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I remember you telling me that, and I was like, God, that is the coolest thing for a parent to do. That is so powerful. Yeah, that's just neat. And don't you keep a journal where
I do.
Where you write to him on a report on his progress?
I'll tell you about the journal. I want to tell you where I just thought of that. I realized where the idea of the letter came from, because it came from one day someone was telling me that they grew up with their mom. Their mom was telling them that their dad was a jerk, their dad hated them, the dad didn't want them, the dad was, because a lot of times people will vilify the other parent. But often what they're trying to do is be right and push the other parent away. It's a sadly common story. I don't know the numbers, but let's just say 25 to 50% of people who think that they were unwanted by the other parent were maybe wanted, but the parent gave up on trying to be with them because the other parent was so difficult. If that makes sense. You still don't give up on your child. But the point being, they later, at age 25, kind of found their dad. They sat down, and the dad said, I never stopped thinking about you and loving you. Every year on your birthday, I took like a newspaper for that day, and I wrote a letter to you, and here's a scrapbook of your birthday every day. And they just started crying, because all of a sudden that big hole got filled with love. And all of a sudden, they just saw the truth that they really did have a father who loved them and thought about them all the time, and the proof was you can't deny, you can't fake that.
Yeah, you have evidence.
You have evidence.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I recently went to visit my dad, who's he's 76 or something. He lives in Colorado, and he's getting up there, as is my mom. They're the same age, and I've always wanted to bring that video camera right there and essentially kind of record a podcast with my dad just for personal use or to pass on to my kids, their kids, whatever. And one of the things I asked him about was, what was the feeling you had when you found out my mom was pregnant? And just be fucking honest, and what was it like for you when my mom took me at 3 years old and moved to California and you lost us? And really just man to man, not me as a little boy, not me as a son, but just like, hey, I'm a guy, you're a guy, we're both humans. Explain to me that experience. And it was so powerful to get his point of view on how hard that was and how he didn't know how to relate to me because I was in this California culture and he wanted to take me hunting and I hated it. And just from his perspective of him trying to love me and not knowing how, but really hearing from him, and I didn't have letters, but I believed him. He said, oh my God, I was obsessed with you. I was so proud of you and loved you so much. And it was so meaningful for me, because it's like, I'm almost 50 years old now. And still, you can tell by my tears,
Yeah.
there's still a part of me that
little
didn't
boy.
know that.
Yeah, that little boy who just thought he was unloved.
Yeah, and I never got, any clear indication that I was not wanted by him or loved by him. But I don't know. He wasn't there. They were divorced. I saw him less, whatever it was. He was pretty rough kind of guy, too. And who knows where I got the message, but to hear from him like, no, I've always loved you so much, and you're perfect, and you were always wanted, and all of that stuff was really meaningful. So I encourage anyone listening, I love what you're doing where you're documenting and creating these letters and the journal and all of this stuff, because these are the core wounds that drive us into all the dysfunctional behavior that we do.
Yeah,
Every personal development thing I've done, Tony Robbins, Hoffman, therapy, 12 steps, whatever, they all just go back to this.
Right.
I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable. And then your life gets fucked up.
Right.
Because of that misconception.
And once you realize that everybody walking around is walking around with the wound of, I felt unloved, I was over-controlled, I was, abused. Most abuse is either this. It's either someone is disempowered. Disempowering is, could be physical abuse, neglect, criticized, or falsely empowered. Falsely empowered is parents are alcoholics, so you have to take over the family. Mom has a horrible relationship with dad. She makes you her emotional partner. So usually everyone's walking around disempowered or falsely empowered, and with that, one of those two core wounds. So I want to mention the journal idea. Man, there's so much to say, but once you realize that when people are reacting, there's that, I think I said on your last podcast, but where there's reactivity, there's a wound. So if you want to find your own stuff, you just see what you overreact to. When you get into that survival situation, you get angry, you shut down, you get pissed off, you turn someone into an enemy. But you can really, once you realize that we're all just the walking wounded, you can have empathy. This great cartoonist named Chris Ware, probably one of the most genius cartoonists, graphic novel writers in the world. He once said to me when I was interviewing him that you should have people should have little patches of what they look like as children, like buttons on their clothing, so you can have some empathy for them when you see them.
Oh, that's amazing!
Yeah.
That's amazing. It's funny. I don't have the buttons on people, but I do my best to build that habitually. Yeah, to see, because it's funny. Even when you see a group of people in a conference like this that are all adults, not much has really changed from a room full of kids.
Right.
The human needs are still the same, and they're still being expressed in many of the same ways.
Yeah.
Even though chronologically and physically we're older.
No,
but we are still the same 5-year-old, 4-year-old, 3-year-old than we were.
Right. And at 10 school, when you see 3 and 4-year-olds just who are bullies, you meet their dad, and you're like, oh, okay, I get it. Right. I see what that is.
Right.
A friend of mine, Adam von Rothfelder, who's a health guy. Fitness. Yeah, I'm sure that's why I mentioned his whole name. But he said, we were talking about this. He said, I've never met a child I didn't like, a parent who I liked, of a child who I didn't like.
Right. Yeah,
I mean that's it. But so I wanted to mention the journal idea. Yeah. Okay. We might have to do part 2 in a minute.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah, that's
okay. So the journal is this. So most parents tell you the same 3 stories about your childhood. That's all they know and all they remember. And obviously, you're not remembering or recording things for the first some people have early memories, but the first 3 or 4 years, maybe you have one little snapshot in your head. So what I decided to do was, well, first of all, you're born, the architecture of your brain is not built yet. And it's almost entirely wired together by those, especially the first 3 years. Children are building new neural connections at an insane amount. And a 3-year-old has more than twice as many neural connections as you and I do. A 3-year-old, because that's wired together that fast. And then after that, while they're still growing, a process called pruning takes place, and the stuff they don't need goes away. That becomes the box you live in. When you're stuck in some way of thinking, that's because that's what happened. You built all the shit you didn't need throughout, and now you're stuck in your fucking box of how you think the world is and what people are like and all that story. So I thought, first of all, I want to give him all his memories. I want the gift of the memories that he doesn't remember, right? So I've kept a journal religiously, every day of his life. It's literally, he's 3.5 now, it's probably 1,200 pages single-spaced.
Wow.
Every story, every experience. Someone's when did your child start walking? I just search walking, it was on this date, and here's a story of it.
Oh my God.
When were his
that's
first words?
So
all
cool.
those things. And kind of bulleted out, I did it another way where I could just remove it from this. So maybe when at the top of it, I said, hey, write down all your memories of your life before you read this, because I don't want you to influence your own memories. And then he could kind of read his whole story. But then secondly, I also said everything going on in the background. What's going on with Ingrid and I, and what led to us separating. Maybe bad parenting choices. Times when, I'm always careful. Children are sponges, right? So if I have a lot of anxiety, say, I won't be around him as a child because they just absorb that. But here, everything that I thought was could be possibly wounding because you can't be perfect. So everything in there is all in the background. So he has his, not just his stories, which are stories, but his emotional DNA, raw and honest, just everything. And then, so there's 3 levels of that. There's the experiences he had. There's the emotional world that he kind of grew up in. And then third is what's between the lines that I don't see. It's kind of all in there.
Wow.
For him.
Oh, that's so
yeah,
cool.
It's amazing. It's so fun because you forget that stuff. You forget what happened a week ago.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, like with interviewing my parents and later in life. I mean, one of the things I'm curious about is what other family members around that I don't really remember, and family history and lineage and things that I was into, and forgetting that I worship Bruce Lee and just weird stuff like that.
But imagine,
you get a flash of memory, like, oh yeah.
Imagine when he's whatever possession, whatever he is, and he's in that profession. He looks back, he's like, oh, that's when I first got interested in that. Or when his personality is like that. Well, when did I first become like that? I'll write down what his personality is like on each month and what's becoming. Oh, that's when I was like that. So it's really fun. And the choices I make. Because I'm not saying my parenting decisions are right. I'm doing the best I know with everything I know today. Right? And generations have different philosophies of parenting. Back, the rod, go get a switch, boy. Get me that switch. You come here, you choose the switch, and I'm going to beat you with that switch that you pick yourself. Like that was normal. That was normal. Like you're going to pick the instrument with which your father now beat you with, right? And if you cry, I'll beat you harder. So you repress all your emotions, right?
Right.
So and that was good parenting then.
Do you remember the moment when you found out your wife was pregnant?
Yes. But I have it written down perfectly in my journal, by the way.
You do?
So I have my memory, but then I literally have it written down like that moment. But yeah, no, I remember it was funny because usually I'm so used to taking a pregnancy test and hoping that it's negative with somebody. Right. So I remember it was the first time doing a pregnancy test and hoping it was positive. That was the first.
That's cool.
Right? It's a very funny experiment because you're anchored to the other side. And then it was negative, and I was so disappointed. But I knew, I just knew she was pregnant. I knew that was it. And I knew the time she was 10 was conceived. I just knew it. And so I'm like, let's just wait a few more days and do it. And then it was positive, and we saved the pregnancy test. I feel like was the first evidence of 10.
That's funny. Yeah, I know the feeling of wanting them to be negative. And that's why I was just curious, because I think, obviously when it's not a planned thing, most men, I'm sure some women, are like, oh, this sucks. And that sucks for the kid later on. No one, you deal with it, I guess, in the ways in which you deal with it, but no one wants to be an accident. You hope that the parents are in love and that the love making was conscious and intentional and you came out of that glorious union,
That's the first moment of emotional truth when both your parents look at that pregnancy test, see a plus or 2 lines or whatever it is, and what feeling do they have when they see that? That's your future. Right?
That's funny. That's funny. Yeah, it is. It's the crystal ball of how your personality is going to be shaped.
Right. Is one happy, one not happy? Are they confused and deciding what to do? Or are two, your two creators overjoyed. Right. And that just shapes your emotional DNA.
And where'd you come up with your son's name, 10?
So what it came from, and sometimes I'll like to tell people, it's from Tennessee Williams or Alfred Lord Tennyson, but where it's really from is, when you're first in love and you're joking around, talk about baby names early on, and you're having sex and you think about what you're. So as a joke, she said, what would your baby name be? I would definitely call my baby, and I tried to think of something ludicrous. So I said tennis shoe. Oh, if you just go around the back there, unless you want to say hi to everybody. Yeah, we're doing this interview outside and in a public area.
Yeah, we're at a hotel just acting like we belong here.
Right, but we've been indoors, so we just wanted to come outside and be in the fresh air.
We're shooting guerrilla style, which is often how I do it.
So I said, what about tennis shoe? And we're as a joke. And so we joked around. And then when she was pregnant, she's like, so what are we going to name the baby? I'm like, of course, it's got to be tennis shoe to Memorials I Love. And I was just bluffing. But down to the last minute, I was pretending we'd call it tennis shoe. It's like a boy named Sue, right? It's going to make you tough to be called tennis shoe. And then we started thinking of names, and we're looking at names, and everything just sounded just boring. And eventually we just decided on calling him just 10, Tenn. And you work it through. You think, are there any ways he can be made fun of? What are the ways that 10 can backfire? Do the initials spell out any rude words? I mean,
Right.
kids will find a way to make fun of you anyway, but at least you don't want to make it too easy for them.
Yeah, if your name sucks, that's difficult.
Right.
That-
And then you get to school in Malibu and everyone's like, amethyst, like, you know, like,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
crystal ambrose rose, and like
Right,
everyone's
right.
got a weird name, like, just should have called him like Dave.
Right, yeah, that would be, he'd be the outlier from just having a normal name.
Yeah.
I remember a kid used to call me Luke Puke. And
Exactly.
I wasn't terribly offended, but I was annoyed because it doesn't technically rhyme. It would have to be Luke Pook. I was
Right.
like, puke doesn't rhyme with Luke. It's a different
Right.
vowel sound. You guys
Right.
are idiots. So it
Right.
didn't actually bother me. I was like,
Right.
come up with something better.
Totally. And it's funny, too. A lot of people think their trauma is that I was bullied at school. And I would argue that what happened at home set you up to be bullied at school. In other words, like, people think, well, my wound is that I was just bullied at school. That's why I'm like, but I'm like, what at home set you up to respond to the bullying? You know, bullies, they look for the weakness. They look for someone who's going to, you know, overreact. They look for someone who is not going to fight back. What set you up for that at home first?
Interesting.
Yeah.
What books or experts have you, I know you're an avid reader, your library is insane. What books or experts have you gleaned skills or perspectives from that you're implementing and finding success
I mean,
with?
the simple answer is really absolutely none.
Really?
and I'm a big reader and learner.
Yeah.
But I haven't. Maybe I should write the book because I haven't found the book yet. Like, you know, you read the kind of you read the books for the practical things, the what to expect and we're expecting, like about what are normal childhood milestones and things like that. But for the what I'm talking about, it was my own emotional healing.
Oh,
But
interesting.
ironically, so it was just like, this is all the stuff I learned. If you're learning about your own trauma, you learn what creates the trauma, right? So you're like, don't do that.
That's
And I
funny.
get-
So you're like reverse engineering your own
Yeah.
childhood, and anything that fucked you up, you're
Right.
omitting from
Right.
your skill set.
Right, but for those who have the pathology that for them to trust the information, it needs a source, which is just a pathology. All information has some sort of fucking source, right? Well, what's your source? You know, most people say, "What's your source?" really means I don't agree with it. That's really what it means, right? But there is a book by Dan Siegel, the kind of scientist, brain scientist, great writer, called Parenting from the Inside Out. And his actually philosophy is, if you want to become a great parent, become conscious of your own wounds and your own trauma and recognize that. And that will make you a great parent. It's all about doing your own work.
Speaking of being a great parent in your own wounds, something that you and I have talked about, and we talked about in our prior recording,
Right.
was this concept of enmeshment, where your parent sort of has no boundaries and takes you
Right.
on as a surrogate spouse and is too close to you in ways that
Right.
are inappropriate for your level of maturity, having experienced a degree of that myself, and I
Right.
know you have. How do you draw the line in terms of being your kid's best friend and being their parent? Is that something that comes naturally,
No,
or do you have
you're
some
not your kid's
cognitive
best
process?
friend. You're not your kid's best friend. You're their parent. Get another best friend who's age appropriate. You're not your kid's best friend, and you're not always going to be your kid's friend, and that's cool. So let me explain some things that might help some parents of kids of any age. There's a process. First of all, I want to talk about a couple things emotionally when a kid grows up, because I see the airport, for someone who understands childhood trauma, the airport is the most painful place to be, probably for physical and like psychological health, right? Just the junk people are eating and being fed with no other option, and then the things parents are doing to their children. First thing is, like, you just see people a young child that's 1 or 2 doesn't have a developed prefrontal cortex. So you tell your child, behave yourself, sit down, be quiet, because you're worried the child is embarrassing you with other people around. That's actually a form of enmeshment. My needs to not be seen as a bad parent or have the shame of others are more important than your childhood needs, which are to be free and spontaneous.
Not to interrupt, but that
Yeah.
totally happens with my dog.
Uh-huh.
She'll do crazy shit, and I feel embarrassed.
Right.
You know, like I let her loose at the beach,
Right.
and she runs up to people and like
Right.
sprays fucking sand in their
Right.
face, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm a bad person.
Right.
I'm a loser. Everyone
Right.
hates me because my dog's being a dog.
Right. And the simple answer is, don't take your dog to the beach. Don't take your child to a nice restaurant till if you're going to be embarrassed by it, right? Just don't take your child there till you feel like they're ready if you're going to be like that. But really trying to over-control a child or talk to a child the way you might talk to like a a pet that's gotten out of control. It's like, it's insane. So the first thing I see is people just trying to get it. When a child is sitting there, a young child sitting there perfectly mannered and quiet, like, no, that's not a good child. That child's going to have some fucking issues growing up. That's like a traumatized, over-controlled, overdeveloped prefrontal cortex child who hasn't been allowed to be spontaneous. And that's one of the rights. It's like the childhood is, first of all, Ten's my greatest teacher. We're talking about that stuff I do. Like, he does everything right. And all I have to do is not fuck it up. Examples. When he goes to pick up something, he doesn't bend over with his back. He just squats. He sits and squats,
really?
right? When he's going to the bathroom, he's like, he does everything right. When he speaks, it's his full voice, right? The strength of a child crying, like they have their full voice. We lose our voice because we're told to shut up, be quiet. Like we lose all that stuff, and just his level of joy and happiness. But here's the coolest thing about a child, and I always think about it for myself. A child can be really, really throw a total tantrum, right? Be really upset and angry. The next second, they're like fine and laughing. And so how can they shift from this emotional and then be fine and laughing and then be sad and upset? But how can they, but when a person is upset, even when whatever they're upset about ends, they stay stuck in the story of why they're upset or depressed and stay in it for days, weeks, months, years sometimes. And so you learn, it's like if you are not attached to the story of why you're sad or upset, you get to move on to the next emotion.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
You're so right. Kids do have the ability to do that, to oscillate like that.
Yeah, and it's once we become attached to
I've
the story
had to
of it.
meditate for 20 years.
Right.
Better at that.
Yeah, and like someone's being loving, like, no, I'm mad at you. Right? Relationships are bad relationships are people stuck in a story. So you have to go start a new story with somebody else. And then you get stuck in that one too if you haven't done your work.
It's like that thing when you're in an argument with someone, and then at some point you have this little chink in your armor, or a crack of light kind of sneaks in this dark room, and you're like, oh my God, we're being so fucking dumb. This means nothing. This is so stupid. And you just start laughing.
Right.
When it could have gone the other way, there's that razor's edge.
Yeah.
Kids have the ability to kind of do that.
Yeah.
They process whatever they're experiencing, and then, oh, now I'm playing. Now I'm moving on to the next thing.
Right. What is mindfulness, but trying to teach someone to be in the present? You're just trying to get back to where a child is, but with all your adult knowledge, with all your historical baggage and your future projections, how can you get to that present place? A child's already there. Like, it's so interesting because I think
they don't have to work at it and build a quote, I'm doing air quotes, practice around mindfulness or being present. It's just the way kind of a wild
they have to do it to
wild person
to unlearn the stuff you're teaching them. They have to learn to. So think about this: that when you start teaching a child words like ball, spoon, sock, you're not really teaching the child language. You're teaching them separation.
Oh, wow.
Right? Because the world is one place. It's just one thing in one place. But then you pull one thing out of that world and say, that's a ball. You're teaching them separation.
Whoa.
Right?
We're like entraining them into duality.
Yeah.
That's trippy.
Right?
Whoa, I never thought about that.
Yeah. But I thought, even as I was doing it, I guess he has to learn this stuff. But he also has to unlearn it later.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Wow, that's funny.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
What about when... All right, I have this thing, and I'm working on it. And I was I actually explained this to someone the other day, and they're like, that's called codependency. But I have really high empathy, right? So I don't know, for some reason I just feel people, probably because I was really close to my mom when I was a kid, and I mirrored her feelings a lot, and there was, some closeness there in ways that maybe weren't that healthy in retrospect, all well-meaning.
Right.
But, I see things now that I couldn't see then. But I have this thing when I'm really close to someone, if they're, like, super pissed at me, I can't just be okay with that. Or if someone's really, really upset, it's very difficult for me to have autonomy and just go, cool, they're going through that. I'm going to stay happy, stay in my own energy field, my own space, and just allow them to have that experience. I think if I had a kid that I really loved and they were screaming at me, I fucking hate you, Daddy, or whatever their version of that is, I would have a hard time just going, and just going about my business and not feeling like responsible for them feeling that way or trying to fix it. Or how do you
so here's the line.
Do you find it hard to be okay when your kid's not okay?
But listen to your words. It comes back to the allow thing that you said earlier. Because like empathy, and I have some questions about whether empathy really exists or is a projection to some degree anyway. But empathy, I feel that you're, I can kind of resonate with your upsetness, is different than like, I need you to like me. Right? So in other words, you can empathize with me being upset or sad. You can empathize with that. But there's a difference. But codependence is and you go like 3 layers deep. You actually go 3 layers. So one is empathy, which is I empathize. I can feel a little bit what you're feeling. Codependence is you're sad, so no, I'm sad. You're happy, so no, I'm happy.
Yes.
And that, I mean, just think of that's like you're tied together. So that literally is like the image of two things that are codependent, because I just get controlled by your moods, which happens a lot in some people with children too. If you don't have good this is boundary work. It's all boundary work. So you can be empathic with boundaries, right? That's what you need to do. But I'm going to give you your third level in a second. But some people with children, so this will be a challenge if your children's upset and crying, and then that triggers you into being stressed out or anxious, or to try to stop that from happening because you feel like they're so sad. All you do is make them cry and upset more because they're feeding off your anxiety, and then they'll never be quiet. Versus like really having a boundary, and this is real empathy. But let me give you the third level. So level 1 is you feel it. Level 2 is
level 1 to be kind of just healthy.
Level 2, but
where you're not a sociopath,
right.
And you're like, wow, I can kind of feel where you are.
Right. Level 2 with you is you go there.
Yeah.
Then level 3 is you have to make it okay.
Yeah, I have to fix it.
Right.
I mean, when I'm in relationships, I have a propensity to do that. Even, my business partner now, who I used to be in a relationship with years ago, if she texts me and is like, hey, can we talk later? I swear to God, it's the way my mind works.
Right.
I immediately think she's pissed off at me and I have to fix it.
Right. So
I can't relax if she's pissed at me about something.
And chances are that strategy doesn't even work.
Yeah, of course.
Right. Yeah, of course not.
And then I call her and she's like, oh, I just want to get your opinion on this desk I was going to buy or something. And I'm like, really?
Right. Which shows you it's not really empathy. Right? It's projection.
No, it's not.
And the people who have none of these, who don't have the empathy, then it's just a wall. So you don't want a wall. You don't want to be boundaryless. You want this kind of porous boundary where stuff comes in, but it doesn't affect or control you, and you're not going to be okay until you fix it, which 100% comes from that enmeshment. Like, I have to take care of the parent.
Right.
And leads to all the problems. So, that's the journey to take.
So when it comes to your kid becoming very emotional, sorry, I'm going to edit out that truck. So when it comes to your kid being hyper emotional or having an outburst or something like that, or just needing to cry, or they stub their knee or whatever the thing is, what's the deal with comforting them and trying to get them to feel better and fix them versus just allowing them to have their space to work it out unto themselves? That's the thing I always trip when I watch people parent and they try to rescue the kid and help them to feel better and oh, you fell down, and make a big deal and get them to stop crying. Versus some parents just being more
Think of how that works. There's so many answers to this because
it's complex.
And there's a level between, say, physical pain and then emotional pain, like a tantrum. Well, let's go with. I trained myself. It's hard when your child falls down not to have a reaction, like especially when they're little, because when they're little, like there's about like a 4-month period where they're constantly trying to kill themselves, right? Like they're just going to crawl off anything and walk, but. By the way, there's a good book actually on parenting called The Continuum Concept. That's pretty cool book about a woman who kind of lived with it, where they raise the children more natural. And they're like, so couple philosophies, a couple thoughts. I have so much to say on this. But the first thing is, I train myself not to react when my child falls. Because what happens? The parent reacts and the child learns to react. So if he falls or he trips, like life goes on. Like, and you'll see like other kids will fall and cry. My child will fall and will just get back up. Right? But it's scary for the parents. So you have to learn to repress that startle reaction, and you just sort of like, cool. And then eventually he learns he's not going to cry or she's not going to cry unless they're actually hurt, or sometimes if they're just really so shocked and surprised by it, they'll cry. Right? And then, so that's the first thing is if you make it about you, if you're startled every time, they're going to get startled. They're mirrors. Funny thing. You were talking about discipline earlier. You can discipline and teach all you want. It doesn't fucking matter because they're watching you. It's your way of being that controls who they are. So, for example, I might teach my kids something about fire being hot. So, what is his response going to be? Next time we're in a fire, he's like, that's a fire, Dada. It's hot. Don't touch the fire. He will model the teaching versus absorbing the information. So they're modeling your way of being.
Wow.
Right?
Wow. That's profound.
Yeah. So people just think if I discipline them, they're just learning to discipline. They're not actually learning the lesson you're trying to teach them with the discipline. I mean, people know that. Like, anyone growing up, you probably always got punished for the same fucking thing. Did that punishment change you from doing that thing? No. Right?
Yeah, I mean, in my case, it made me do it more.
Exactly. So it's not even an effective technique.
It's like to torture myself and my parents.
Right. And then that's another idea, the idea that, like, punishment stops a behavior especially with a teenager, like, is insane. So that's one sort of emotion. So basically my thought with, and there are different kinds of tantrums that a child have. One tantrum is when they're open to consoling. Another one is where there's just a screaming wreck and you got to give them that space. But usually my idea is, it's like a car. It's like if you're trying to change the direction someone's walking in or car's driving in, you kind of go parallel with them, and then you can slowly sort of turn a little bit. If you try to just T-bone them, the car's not going to go in another direction. I'm not trying to change it. So the first thing is, so many parents, and I think most people here don't do this and get this by now, try to make somebody feel, I guess not, try to make somebody feel better. If you're trying to teach it, think about this as with your addict past. If a child's sad, angry, hurt, upset, and you're trying to make the child feel better, they're learning to medicate their emotions, right? Instead of to sit, it's okay to be fucking sad. It's okay to be angry. It's really okay. It's not a bad thing. This whole happiness culture is insane. I'm in the acceptance culture. Fuck that happiness culture.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Amen. Because listen, if a doctor doesn't medicate them for having feelings and labeling it as some sort of mental disorder, not to say that there aren't real disorders, but many of them I think are misdiagnosed based on my observation. If a doctor doesn't do it, the kid's going to find a way to do it, whether it's video games or later on drugs or whatever.
Right. If you're in the, it's like if this is fucking no one knows normal. This is normal, and this is like depression. If you're in the extreme, it's just the extremes that maybe need to be dealt with. But anything off the bearing is okay. Anyway, so my thing is to like validate the emotion. Like, this goes for relationships too. Actually, it's like you don't have to fix it. The person just has to feel understood about what they're feeling. Oh. So when Ingrid was kind of upset at me about something, and it isn't, you hear it as a request to change, but you can just understand and validate their feeling about it. So I really just validate, okay, so you're angry because you can't play with that knife. I understand you're angry about that because, knife looks like shiny and fun and you want to play with that.
That's so cool.
Right?
That's so cool. Yeah. That's a cool dad. I'm like, I want you as a dad, Neil.
Right.
That's cool. That's cool shit. Yeah. Well, there's, one of my favorite books, it's half psychology and half spirituality, is David R. Hawkins. I think I turned you on to some of his audio stuff years ago, and he wrote a lot of books that are deeply complex on non-duality, and they're spiritual, but they're really kind of hard to grasp. Right. And then before he died, I think he kind of knew, like, hey, let me leave some breadcrumbs for the non-intellectual spiritual seekers. He wrote a book called Letting Go, and the premise of the whole book, it's called Letting Go, The Pathway of Surrender. Right. And the entire premise of the book is what's making anyone unhappy in their life is suppressing their emotions. And the fastest way through any uncomfortable sensation or feeling that you're having is to allow it to 100% be there and just saturate yourself in it. And you'd be amazed at how fast it goes away. And it's really true. Because like when you stub your toe and you're like, it actually, if you just stop and breathe and just let it hurt, it's gone in like 7 seconds.
Because the goal is not to never be sad, is to raise your capacity for handling sadness, to raise your capacity for handling uncomfortable emotions so you can actually be cool with it. If you don't learn to if you have no capacity for it, you'll turn to the drug, whether it's like, an actual drug like an opiate or work or sex or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And again, by the way, you can never be a perfect parent. It's impossible because you're a human being and you're imperfect. So the other piece is just to really recognize, you won't be perfect, but to always sort of, if I ever do anything wrong, I'll just say, Dada did that and that was wrong and here's why. Whether he understands it or not, I try to repair.
I wanted to
stuff
ask you about that. So what happens when you really choke and something, you react and something slips out of your mouth that's hurtful or that you regret? Like how do you make amends to a 3-year-old in a way that he understands?
Yeah, I think I'll just say Dada did that and that was wrong. I think a huge wound is when a parent tries to be perfect and they're righteous and they're always right. And they can never be contradicted, and everything they did was perfect. What happens is people call that spiritual abuse because the parent becomes like God, right? Infallible, always right. And these are the hardest people to work with psychologically because for them to question that their parent may have been wrong is like blasphemy, at a deep
because
level.
They have this sense of omniscience.
Yeah, and it's like a huge
figure.
And it's a betrayal of the entire family system. That if anything they did was not perfect, they're the hardest to work with, and the ones who get triggered and leave and say this is just blaming your parents. None of this is about blaming your parents. It's about understanding yourself. There's no blame. Most people are doing the best they can with the resources they have, but you just got to look at your life like it's a movie and say, well, that was the cause. What was the effect? It's just cause and effect.
I like that you're communicating that so early on, because in my experience, I had to become older than my parents were
Right.
when they raised me,
Right.
in order for me to sort of see from their perspective.
Right.
They were just they were 27-year-old fucking knuckleheads.
Right. Yeah.
If I would have had a kid at 27, I would have been a disaster of a
Right.
parent, you know?
Right.
And when you get older, you look and go, oh, they were just human. They weren't these, I didn't have this ideal of my parents to be flawless or not make mistakes or anything like that. As you get older, you go, oh, God, I totally get
Right.
why they were the way they were, and they
Right.
did things in ways that were less than optimal at times. But it's cool to be able to, I think, as you grow up with your child, to be able
Right.
to communicate like, hey, I just totally screwed up. Yeah, I'm human
Right.
too. I'm your dad, but
Right.
I'm not perfect. I'm not God, so don't expect me to be. And I
Yeah.
think there's going to be inherent sort of ongoing forgiveness
Right.
within the context of the relationship as you grow and mature
Right.
together.
And here's a key thing for parents. I was talking to somebody who lives in the neighborhood, and she was, has a great career, and her kids were over one day. They're adult, they're 18, 20, 20, and they were like, Mom, you're never there for us. You're never around for us. She's like, and she was telling me how great of a parent she was, because she's like, I sat them down. I grabbed that photo album. I'm like, there's us in Monaco. There's us in France. That's us together here. And so you're, and I'm like, and I looked at her. I'm like, you just blew it. You just blew it. Your kids came to you and they told you their truth, and you made them wrong. They won't be open to you again. And just all they wanted to do is be listened and be heard. And so even if you don't agree, you can listen and hear that that's their experience, and validate their experience, because their experience is true to them. You can have two kids who grew up in the exact same household. It doesn't even matter what you experienced; it's what you thought you experienced.
That's the weird thing I've observed in terms of looking at siblings, that sort of, one goes down the right path, one goes down the left path, meaning, one gets into trouble, juvenile delinquent, drugs, etc. Same parents, same general
Right.
experience growing up, similar age. And then one kind of goes off and does well in school and is integrated and seemingly happy and goes off to college and is successful in life by the metric that we determine success. And I've always looked at that, like, what makes one kid become the, prostitute, crackhead, and the other one
Right.
that had the same parents that got, mostly the same treatment. And it a lot of it, I think, has to do with the way that you perceive
Well, the answer is
experiences. It's just
IFS
weird.
is the answer, internal
Okay.
family systems.
Okay.
So first of all, just to sort of like basic knowledge, we're all born with certain genetic predispositions and resiliencies. We have those going in, but then these things can take us on or off course. So in a dysfunctional family, which is just about every family, children take on different roles to fill in that dysfunction. So you won't, in a family, they won't all be what's called the hero role. They won't all be heroes. Usually there's a hero. Look at how good she's doing. Like, she's getting the star of this team and getting all those grades. And then there's a scapegoat. And he's just a good for nothing. Why can't you be more like your sister?
Right.
And so there's a hero. There's a scapegoat. There could be the mascot who just tries to cheer everybody up when, So wow. That was the mascot. So a woman named Claudia Black has studied this, and she talks about the family roles, and your childhood role will have a certain outcome later in life. Like, the hero will often be a perfectionist, and the hero will often sometimes fail in life because they're too scared. A lot of people who don't finish stuff, like, they'll start it but they'll never finish because they're too scared that their own self-image as the hero will be proven wrong if they fail, so better not to attempt, so they can hold on to their own illusory self-image. Again, the mascots, everyone who's trying to always make everybody happy, everyone takes on their different roles in the family, and those lead to corresponding issues later in life.
Absolutely. I've observed that in families in which there are siblings, and you see how that plays out
Right.
later on.
I want to say two other things.
Yeah.
These are all fresh for me with our child. Like, there's so much. It's fun. I literally have not talked about this in public before.
I'm excited.
So I'm just
well,
glowing
when
with
I've
this
chatted
excitement.
with you about it, and even when you told me about the
Right,
letters and
right.
the cool things you're doing,
Yeah.
I'm like, I gotta dig in with Neil and find out what he's doing, because I'm sure that it's being done in a conscious and interesting way. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that you're unloading and excited. With all
Yeah.
this stuff.
Two other things I do is I always give. One is, because a child's always in the present. One thing is I never leave with him upset or crying. Child doesn't want dad or mom to leave. I will wait till he's happy and doesn't feel abandoned. But if you understand that a child's always in the present moment, he can be, I want to go, maybe I'm at Ingrid's. He's like, I want to go with Dada. I'm like, you want to go with Dada? She's like, yes. And maybe I'm late to some meeting or something, like, and Ten has to stay with Ingrid to go to somewhere. I'm like, you want to go with Dada? Like, let's go. Get in the car. So I'll get in the car. I'll drive around the block. Be like, do you have fun? Yeah, I had fun. Great. And then he's happy. Bye, Dada. We translate a child's
Great.
thing into our stuff. We think it's forever. Like if I say I don't like Luke, that's kind of forever. If a child doesn't like Luke, he just doesn't like Luke in that moment, and 2 minutes later he could love Luke. So when the child wants to go with you and you're like, no, you can't, I have to go to work, you can be like, yeah, a child doesn't really want to come to work with you. Like, he just wants to know that he can come to work with you. And you're like, okay, so literally I'll just let him do it, and 3 seconds later he got to do it and he's over it.
That's hilarious.
You know?
It's like that thing when you leave your dog and they're real upset
Right.
when you leave, and then you realize when you get home they're just as excited 10 minutes later than if you went to the fucking movies for 3 hours.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Like the dog doesn't really, he's just in the moment and they're bummed because you leave and they're excited when you get back, but I really don't think they can perceive the period of time in between.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel more guilty leaving for 3 hours than 30 minutes.
Right.
But to the dog, it's the same
it's
coming
the same
and going,
thing, yeah.
right?
And knowing you'll always come back. A friend of mine has a great thing he does. If he's going on he's a touring musician, so the mom will give their daughter, who's 3.5, like a calendar to check off the days till dad comes back, so she knows that he's not gone forever and isn't abandoned. On this day, dad will be back.
Oh, cool.
Another thing is to give a child agency, because think about, we all think I'd like to be a child. It'd be horrible to be a child. They're crying and upset way more than you are in your life. If you just cried and were upset 1/100th of that, you would want medication, right? But they have no agency. You're being strapped into things. You have no agency as a child. So giving a child choice is like so powerful. And I know when I'm out and people are like, oh, that was amazing parenting, because your child, you know, maybe he has a tantrum about something. Well, do you want that or do you want that? And giving them that choice and agency is so powerful. But I know we're gonna have to wrap it up in a second, and I want to bounce to one thing. I've been talking about like those early. Overall, they're two. If you think a child, that they're like two main phases. Let's say, I mean, obviously there's like the infant phase where they're just completely dependent. But if you think of the early childhood phase, let's say, and then there's the teenage phase, which we haven't discussed. So just want to kind of throw this out there because I think it'll help people who, whether you have teenagers or you have a friend with teenagers, there's this natural process that happens. So the child is completely dependent, but the teenager becomes anti-dependent, right? So some people could be great parents to a dependent child, but when they start breaking away, like you were saying, what do I do if my child hates me? Well, guess what? Your child's going to fucking hate you. Right, I go on tour with like rock stars, and because I'm normally a writer for Rolling Stone, and you'll see someone who plays for 50,000 people, adoring fans, and the child's like embarrassed by their dad. Oh my God, so embarrassing. Like, those people just like worship the ground your dad walks on.
Right.
So, like the number one key place where children's wound is in the dependent child when their dependency needs aren't taken care of. But then you have anti-dependency needs. What is the anti-dependency need? It's the need to separate. So as a adult, if you allow your child to, they want to separate faster than you want them to, than is healthy for them. So if you allow them to slowly separate and slowly expand those boundaries, that's where a lot of the self-esteem and growth come in. So a lot of the self-esteem wounds come from a child not being allowed to individuate as their own person. And separate healthily. So you have to realize that a time comes, and it's actually earlier than the teenage years, right? Where their goal and their programming is to separate from you, and sort of being the moderator of that separation versus, oh my God, what's wrong with them? They're so bad. What's ungrateful? All that crazy shit that the parent puts on them because they need that love. The love will come later. If you let them separate healthily, you'll get decades of love afterward. If you don't, they're not even going to want to talk to you when they're older.
Oh, that's amazing. That's something terrifying to look forward to
Yeah.
when you have teenagers, because you know that that's coming, right?
Yeah. But you can.
Yeah,
But if you can
but-
understand it, you can not
yeah.
take it personally, and then have.
Yeah,
somebody
know that
who's-
it's a part of. I mean, obviously, it's a part of nature's wiring to
Yeah.
make human offspring be able to go take care of themselves,
Right.
and so there's a part of them that just starts to spring up. That's like, I hate you, and you're like, but what? I
Right.
did everything for you.
Right,
You know?
right.
I don't deserve this. And
Right.
it's like, no, nature's doing
Yeah.
that to
And-
protect them
Yeah.
and get them out of the goddamn nest.
And at least the two other notes, my mom
Yeah.
always had that, and so many parents are like, I did so much for you. How can you do this? Like, there's an idea that you owe your parents something. Like 10, and then you owe your parents nothing. You owe them nothing. It's nice to take care of them when they're a dependent elder. So many people listening are probably taking care of parents who can take care of themselves. It's different when they're sick or in the hospital or something like that. That's different. That's really a nice thing to do if they're sick. But you don't owe them anything. Tell them I'll be in a minute. Okay. Yeah. Oh, good. 1 minute left. Okay. That it was their choice to have you. Everything I do for my child is a choice. and everything's a fucking joy. Even changing his diapers, you get to be close to this little like cute baby, like it's just the cutest thing in the world. Like it's a joy. Like he doesn't owe me anything. If he chooses to never talk to me, which I hope doesn't happen, I'll be really sad. But he doesn't owe me anything because I did it. It's not a transaction. So if a parent is saying that you somehow owe them something because of all they did for you, it's a sign of how poorly you were parented, right? It's your choice. They had the choice to have you, and everything they did, if it wasn't, a joy, probably damaged you.
Awesome. All right, I've got two real quick questions that you can answer, without elaborating, just because.
And just to clarify that, it's not like everything's a joy. Sometimes it's a hardship. Parenting is the hardest fucking thing ever.
Yeah.
It is, but like the net effect is joy.
Yeah.
Okay.
I get that.
Man, it's so fun to talk about, man. I could go on forever.
In the spirit of us being here with Jack Cruz and learning all about EMFs and Wi-Fi and 5G and blue light and all of that, what's your perspective on screen time and devices and getting a kid habituated to the dopamine and all of the stuff that we're now finding out about, how many parents are raising their kids with this technology?
Right. I mean, I think that's one of the boundaries to do. And this is Ingrid, and she, we unplug the internet at night, and and put on the. He doesn't care about the brightness or the colors coming out of the screen. So just put on the that iPhone hack that Matt Maruka talked about, where
red screen,
we can do the red screen. So we'll do all that, and then you just have to minimize it because it is addictive, and it is probably one of the biggest challenges of parenting. And there are a number of ways to do it, but I think there's a danger, and again, I think it's harder with teenagers or when they're older. But I know one parent that is. They have the charging cord, so they just they have a couple charges to moderate over the course of a week. But I think there's a danger in giving them something as a reward. If you're good, you get to do this, because then it habituates them to think of it as a reward. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's one of the dangers of the technology to begin with, is it's a dopamine reward every time you refresh your page or get your likes or whatever it is. So,
and to be frank, we thought we would never do it, but there are times when just for me, I'm just being frank, honest here, you do use it as a babysitter for a little bit. You're like, fuck, I have to make this call.
Too. I'm like, dude, I got to get some emails done, and the kid's like, Daddy, I want to play. I'm like, cool, here's the iPad. I got to get shit done. I mean, I can imagine that's, it used to be, here's your teddy bear, your football or whatever, but, you now have something that's even more engaging that's going to, in fact, distract them in a more meaningful way, which could assist you in being able to, do life.
And it's basically, so here's the simple way we do it, which is we let it die as often as possible. And so I just let it die as often as possible. So when he wants to play, I'm like, oh, sorry, no batteries. Oh, no, it's not working. So So here's the thing. We're going to tie this all together because I think we started off talking about the house burning.
Yeah.
So to tie it together, in Malibu, this is just my friends. I'm not saying it's everybody. My friends who lost their houses are happier than the people who didn't, even though it's obviously a bigger trauma. Why? Well, when you lose your house, you have no choice. It's just all gone. The ones who didn't are like, oh, there's toxic chemicals in there, and the company's not coming, and my insurance is doing this. The ones who lost their house, you just have to choose to make the best of it. Same with the iPad. If there's a charged iPad there and you say you can't use it, well, they feel like you have choice, so they can work on you. If there's a dead iPad there's nothing they can do about it. So having when it's not your choice, you can't have a tantrum. Another example, if you want your kids to eat fucking healthy, don't have anything unhealthy in the house. They will look through the fridge and the things and take something, and then you're going to have an argument with them about that cracker or that candy or whatever it is. If you have nothing there, they look through there and they'll take the fruit or they'll take what's best. So when they don't have a choice and you have no ability to say no, it's out of my control. The iPad is dead and there's no candy in the house.
Awesome. I love it, dude. Well, I think we covered a lot of great stuff.
We did, man. I feel like we scratched the surface.
There's
it's so fun to talk.
There's always more. We'll check in when 10's a couple years older. You'll have a new set of challenges and solutions.
And I'm still learning. But I think the most important thing I can say is conscious parenting is the most important thing you can do in this lifetime you're going to have children. And it starts with being conscious of yourself and your own stuff. There's a young quote I'm going to botch, but we can end with that. Is until you make the unconscious conscious, these bad things will happen to you, and you'll be in drama and trauma, and you'll call it fate. But it isn't. You just have to make the unconscious conscious for yourself and then for the next generation.
Beautiful. Closing question is, you've taught me a ton today. You've taught our listeners some amazing information. Who have been 3 teachers or teachings in your life that have influenced you that our listeners might be able to go look up and learn from?
Yeah. Rick Rubin. Just a great mentor. Pia Melody did a lot of the work on trauma. that we're talking about. Probably Bugs Bunny, because he just doesn't give a fuck.
That's a first.
Yeah.
I think Rick's the first too. Pia Melody maybe mentioned before. That's good.
Okay, cool.
I love that. I love that question because I'm always like, what the hell are they going to say?
Yeah,
Sometimes
exactly.
it's like, oh, obviously Jesus, Eckhart
Right.
Tolle, whatever,
And it's not a set. If you ask me like 3 hours, I'd have 3 different people probably.
Yeah, totally. Cool. And where can people find you? Websites, anything you want to promote, social media, if people want to look you up and learn more about you?
I mean, the main thing is I have to run in. I'm doing this podcast. I don't even know. I think the title's going to be Los Angeles. It starts in February via Tenderfoot and Up and Vanished, but it's an insane 12-part story. What's interesting, it's a murder or a crime story, but it relates to some of the psychological stuff we're talking about.
Cool.
That's all I can say.
Can't wait.
But if you start the first episode, it's all true. It's super intense. It's super sad and really. There's a lot to learn from it, and I don't know. I'm gonna go.
Cool. I'm looking forward to that, and I think that what we just recorded will probably come out in late February, so maybe it'll already be out and people can dig right in. So
Yeah.
thanks for that. I can't wait to hear it.
All right, cool, man. Thanks.
Later.
All right, love you, man.
You too.